And now let's track the top story that we are tracking here on NewsX World in this bulletin. A delegation of senior Hamas officials has arrived in Cairo to meet Egyptian intelligence amid rising tensions in the Gaza Strip. They are expected to hold talks with representatives from Egypt, Qatar and the United States. The meetings aim to discuss ways to contain the recent escalation of hostilities. Officials will also review plans for the next stage of US President Donald Trump's initiatives for Gaza's future. Diplomats say the discussions could play a key role in reducing violence and advancing mediation efforts in the region. I now like to welcome Sasha Mashta, who's a political commentator who's joining us live from Jerusalem. A very warm welcome to you and thank you for joining us, Mr. Mashta. Now, how do you see these political developments shaping and what do you expect? Do we see or should we see a breakthrough from these talks?
So we have to take everything that's coming out from these talks, first of all, with a grain of salt. Of course, Hamas has no good faith in these negotiations, and there's been quite contradicting reports coming out of the region. Meanwhile, Hamas has said that they're looking at the ceasefire ending while sending a delegation to Cairo to discuss phase 2. So there's a lot of contradictions coming out at the moment with Hamas. On one side, it appears that the ceasefire is breaking down. On the other hand, they are negotiating the continuation. This is, of course, games by Hamas to continue violating the ceasefire while pretending and acting as if they are in good faith and wish to see the continuation of the Trump plan. Of course, Israel does not desire to go back to war. Israel has constantly been enforcing the ceasefire and responding to grave violations by Hamas. But ultimately, this is going to be up to whether the mediators are able to pressure Hamas to continue following the Trump peace plan.
Right. Now, given that the peace plan that Trump has put forward is under review, what kind of changes are being accepted from either side?
So, first, one of the most important clauses or one of the most important aspects of the agreement is the ISF, the International Stabilization Force. This force, comprised of different moderate Arab nations sending troops into Gaza, is going to be crucial in disarming Hamas and demilitarizing the Gaza Strip to allow for the continuation of the plan and for Gaza to be rebuilt and de-radicalized. Of course, this depends on nations, Arab nations, actually desiring and wanting to send in their own soldiers, which understandably is an issue for many because people and countries don't want to send in their troops to fight Hamas. So the question of Hamas disarmament is the most important going forward. It's going to determine the success of this ceasefire. And of course, Israel continues to call for the ISF to be formed and enter Gaza after it's already been approved in the UN. It's already been given the green light. Now countries are just going to need to be willing to do so. And it's also going to depend on what leverage Trump has over certain countries because, of course, most nations out of goodwill would not want to risk their soldiers, understandably again. And hopefully the IDF won't have to go back in and do this job and we'll see the ISF coming into Gaza and being in charge of the disarmament.
Do you see Trump conceding to the international pressure that's being mounted on him for supporting Israel's efforts so far?
No, I think that Trump has been consistent throughout not only this administration, but his past administration and his staunch support for Israel. But at the same time, Trump's goals are aligned with those of Israel and the region. The new Middle East that both Trump, Israel, even the Saudis want to create depends on radical groups, first and foremost Hamas and the Iranian axis actually falling. And Hamas disarmament is key to reaching a new Middle East with the expansion of the Abraham Accords, with rebuilding Gaza, and with allowing a future in this Middle East without radical ideologies that hold their citizens hostages and bring chaos and conflict to the region. So Trump has been firm on this. Trump has been firm that Hamas must disarm, and we expect that one way or another, this is what will end up happening. There's no choice.
All right, Sasha, I request you to stay on as I have some more news to give our viewers now. In Gaza, the civil defense says that Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 21 people and wounded more than 80. The first strike hit a car in Gaza's crowded Rimal neighborhood, setting it on fire. Additional airstrikes targeted homes in Deir al-Balah, Nusrat camps, and the western Gaza city, killing at least 15 more. Israel said the strikes were in response to a gunman entering Israeli-held territory, calling it a ceasefire violation. However, Hamas rejected the claim, calling it an excuse to kill as tensions test a fragile truce agreed over 6 weeks ago. Let's bring back Sasha into the discussion. Sasha, now clearly the ceasefire and the truce deal that was struck upon is not being respected as we would expect it to. How do you see the developments shaping up going forward from here? Do we see any sort of retaliation from the Gaza side?
So, first of all, this in fact was a retaliation to Hamas's violation of the ceasefire, where they sent in gunmen to attack IDF soldiers. This is a grave, a serious violation of the ceasefire. And one of the keys to this Trump plan is that no violation of the ceasefire on behalf of Hamas will be unresponded to. And this is one of the main issues that Israel has been under for the past years regarding ceasefires and agreements, that we learned that a ceasefire cannot be unilateral. One side cannot abide by it alone. It requires two parties. And of course, Hamas, with this grave violation of the ceasefire, was responded to. Israel targeted senior Hamas officials in response. And of course, the 21 civilian count coming out by the Gaza ministry, which of course is run by Hamas, does not distinguish between civilians and fighters. So everything must be taken with a grain of salt and understood that Hamas is still running these numbers, and Hamas, the same Hamas that is unable to find 3 bodies of hostages that they've held for 2 years, can come up with numbers for civilian deaths instantly. I mean, the logic doesn't make sense there. And we hope that the civilians of Gaza will be free from Hamas's rule and Hamas's brutality. And in fact, that the whole region can be free of Hamas. And going forward, we hope that the disarmament will happen, and it must happen. And there's really no choice for Israel, for the region.
All right. Thank you, Sasha, for joining us here on NewsX World. I thank you for sharing your insights and opinion with us. And with that, viewers, let's move on to the next big story that we are tracking here.